Hey guys, I'm going to talk a little bit today about appeasement and World War II. You will learn if you don't know what appeasement is right now. You will learn in this in this lesson. But as usual, you should be taking notes on your pieces chart that I've given to you, and using that and turning that in at the end. Okay, same as usual, same rules as usual. Okay. All right, as a different kind of warm up for today, um, I want to ask you three questions about this about this image that I have in front of you, um, and then if you want to write them down on your pieces chart or somewhere else, that's fine. I just want you to think about these for a minute before we get started today. So the first question: who is this the artist? This what is what that should say. The artist of this cartoon. Do you recognize the style at all? And if you don't recognize the style, look very closely and you might be able to see. Okay. Um, the next question: what the leaders of what two countries are depicted in the drawing? What two countries? The leaders of what two countries are depicted in the drawing? One of them you'll probably know pretty well. We're looking for the countries, not the names of the leaders, though. The other one you might have to guess. And then number three: what is the cartoon attempting to get people to do? What is the cartoon attempting to get people to do? All right, one of y'all think about that for a second. So, so in case you didn't you didn't see this already, you will. Oops, I'm gonna have to turn on my laser pointer. I have to do this. Okay. All right. So in case you haven't seen it already, right here tells you who the artist is, and it's Dr. Seuss. Now, Dr. Seuss has made headlines recently for for some books that he wrote at one point that had racist caricatures in them. There are four books I think that made news that they were taken off the presses, and they're not available anymore. Um, from the owner of the rights of Dr. Seuss, they took them off the presses so that so that anyway, those wouldn't be in publication anymore. So that made huge news a few weeks ago. But I in there's that Dr. Seuss that that had some pretty racist depictions of different people. But you've also got another version of Dr. Seuss that we're going to see today, who was who not only did children's books like y'all are familiar with, but political cartoons as well that took a very specific stance, as, I guess, against Germany, and against the United States wanting to stay out of World War II. So at first, at the beginning of the war, the United States wanted to stay out of World War II and not get involved, and so did, as we'll see today, a lot of countries did not want to start the war to begin with, and they just kind of wanted to let Germany do whatever they wanted. And Dr. Seuss was had many different political cartoons fighting against that, and pushing back against that, and pointing out the things that that Germany was doing, that that Britain and France, the United States, were really getting walked over, to because because of what Hitler was doing. So we're going to see that a little bit today. I'm going to show you some of those political cartoons, but on the way, I'm going to talk about what appeasement is and how appeasement led to World War II. Okay, so let's get started here. All right, so remember from our last lesson, was it our last lesson or was it? It was anyway. It was last week that The Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919, and it had several regulations. Most of these had to do with with punishing Germany for World War One. So Germany had to accept blame for World War One. They were forced to pay over $30 billion in reparations, um, and and Germany lost territory. Um, as a result of the of the Treaty of Versailles. So so they lost Alsace and Lorraine, the Polish corridor, part of Poland, and the Saar coal fields, which was part of Austria, or I think it was near Austria-Hungary. I don't remember for sure. There, but they lost a lot of territory. Alsace and Lorraine was right next to France. They lost that to France. They lost what became Poland. So German territory was greatly reduced as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. I kind of blew by this. They had to pay over $30 billion in reparations as part of this, as taking blame for the war and then paying Britain and France back for essentially the money that Britain and France used on the war. The Rhineland was also demilitarized, and that's this territory in Germany, but close to the French border. That was agreed to be demilitarized. That they wouldn't have any military in the Rhineland, and they wouldn't have any military in the Rhineland because it was right next to France, and France wanted to make sure that Germany didn't invade them again, or you couldn't easily invade them again. In addition to all that, Germany's armed forces was limited to 100,000 men and no submarines, or was that I got messed up here. I can't I can't read what that no, I can't remember what the other thing was. Submarines or something else. Was it tanks? I forget. Anyway, but there's but severe restrictions on Germany's armed forces. Okay. Now, at these, actually, let's go back here. Let me fix that real quick. If I don't fix this now, I'm not going to remember it all. Oops, airplanes. There we go. No submarines or airplanes. That's what it was. Let's see. There we go. Made it a little bit smaller. We're good to go there. Okay. All right, so then, so we talked about kind of what happened between the wars, or a lot about what happened between the wars, but we want to first talk about what appeasement is and how it led to World War II. Okay, so to talk about what appeasement is, I want you to imagine that you have a child. Okay, you have a child, and you take this child to the grocery store. Okay. You take your child to the grocery store, and your child gets to the cereal aisle and throws the biggest fit in the world. Okay, child throws a fit, says, "I want Lucky Charms. Give me my Lucky Charms right now." You know, whatever. Okay, throws a fit, wanting Lucky Charms. Okay. Um, you say, or maybe she asks for Lucky Charms and you say no, and then she throws a fit, something like that. Okay, so just imagine with me, your child's now throwing a fit in the middle of the grocery store aisle. Said, "I want these Lucky Charms now." Right? Okay. So the question is, what do you do in that situation? Okay. Do you say no? You're not getting Lucky Charms, or do you say, okay, you're throwing a fit in the middle of the grocery store. I got to put a stop to this. Okay, I'm going to give you the Lucky Charms, right? Now, if you were, I know what you're probably thinking is no, wouldn't give them the Lucky Charms. They're going to have to get over it, blah, 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 right? Most of y'all would say that. Some of y'all are probably be like, well, in that situation, if I'm being honest with myself, I might actually give them the Lucky Charms because that's not that's not something you want to be dealing with in the grocery store. If they're going to throw a fit like that, one way to end it quickly is to just give them Lucky Charms. Not that big of a deal, right? So if you were to give them the Lucky Charms, give them what they want, because they threw this fit, that's what we call appeasement. Okay, you're doing something just to make someone happy so they don't make a bigger problem. Okay. And that is what happens at the beginning, or that's what happens leading up to World War II with the countries in Western Europe as a result of of what Adolf Hitler does in Germany. So we're going to take a look at that, what appeasement is, what happens, what the other countries do in response to Adolf Hitler essentially throwing a fit, and wanting what he wants. Okay, so to to back up to the beginning, Adolf Hitler in 1933 becomes Chancellor of Germany, and he gets this title of Chancellor of Germany, in part because he had campaigned on wanting Lebensraum, or living space, around his country. That Germany, because of the territory lost as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, needed to be larger and and gain territory again to make to make room for the growth of the country. Okay, so he wanted Lebensraum, or living space, a little bit of leg room to expand. Okay, so expansion is a huge part of this. So that's, from there what he does. So Hitler announces the expansion of the Wehrmacht, which is the German military, to 600,000 members. No, remember that the Treaty of Versailles limited it to 100,000 members. So this is 6 times the number of of soldiers permitted by the Treaty of Versailles. 600,000 members. So he's already breaking the Treaty of Versailles, one time just now. What happens? Essentially, nothing. The other countries in the League of Nations, or Britain and France, all them, they don't really do anything, because they don't want to start a war. In 1936, Hitler claims Germany feels threatened, and he sends in forces to occupy the Rhineland. Remember, the Rhineland is this area right here. Which, oops, I need to turn on my laser pointer again. So the Rhineland is this area right here in Germany that is on the French border, and that I guess French and Belgian border, and a couple other smaller countries as well, and that's to it's demilitarized so that they can't easily invade these countries, especially France. So he says, "Hey, we feel threatened by these countries over here, so we're going to send in forces to occupy the Rhineland, also against the Treaty of Versailles, because it's supposed to be demilitarized there." Okay, what do the other countries do? Nothing, even still. Okay. In 1938, Hitler next wants Anschluss, or union with Austria. In other words, he wants to annex Austria to become part of Germany. He wants to annex Austria right here, so that Germany becomes this greater Germany right here, has more territory and includes Austria. This was also forbidden by the Treaty of Versailles. He actually does annex Austria in 1938, and again, these countries don't really do anything as a result of that. And in 1938, Hitler next claims that his last territorial demand is the Sudetenland. The Sudetenland is part of Czechoslovakia, kind of the outer rim of Czechoslovakia, where 3 million ethnic Germans lived. So Hitler claimed that this should be part of Germany because so many Germans lived there. However, it was also home to 66% of Czechoslovakia's coal, 70% of its iron and steel, and 70% of its electric power. So what does Hitler probably actually want? He wants these resources, right? And he says, "Hey, I'm going to take over the Sudetenland so that so they can be part of Germany." Really, he just wants these resources. So without these resources, the Czech nation would be vulnerable to complete German domination. So essentially, if he gets the Sudetenland, he could easily take over all of Czechoslovakia from there. So Hitler claims, yes, I'm going to take the Sudetenland next, and this is what finally causes problems with the other countries in Europe, and they start really getting down to business and having meetings with Hitler about these demands that he's having. Okay, so what do you think? which, by the way, when we say annex the Sudetenland and stuff, really he's taking it over by military. So he took over Austria by military force. Now he's taking over the Sudetenland by military force, which would then allow him to basically take over all of Czechoslovakia by military force. So what will these world leaders choose to do about Adolf Hitler's actions? What are they going to do? You've got uh, uh, Franklin Roosevelt in the United States, President of the United States. You've got Neville Chamberlain, who's Prime Minister of the United Kingdom or Great Britain, and then this other guy in France. I don't know his name. What are they going to do about Adolf Hitler, and what are they what are they going to say to him to try to get him to stop taking all this territory? Because if he keeps taking this territory, they're going to end up in a war. If they try to stop him from taking the territory, they're going to end up in a war. They don't want another world war. So what could they possibly do? So they have a conference with Hitler. They have a meeting with him, and it's called the Munich Conference. So the Munich Conference is is a meeting with the leaders of France, England, and Italy. Between it's a meeting between the leaders of France, England, and Italy, and Adolf Hitler of Germany. And they're meeting with Hitler to try to figure out, okay, what can we do about this constant taking over territory? It's got to stop. So what's going to happen? Okay, so Czechoslovakia's leaders were not permitted to attend, even though that the annexation of the Sudetenland is what they're meeting about. Czechoslovakia's leaders did not attend. Notice, hey, Germany didn't get to attend the Treaty of Versailles. We talked about in the last unit how no leaders of Africa were, or no leaders of any African nation attended the Berlin Conference to decide what was going to happen to colonization or European colonization of Africa, and that look what happened there. So, if Czechoslovakia's leaders aren't attending here, what do you think is going to happen to them? Probably not good things, right? So Germany, as a result of the Munich Conference, was allowed to annex portions of Czechoslovakia, including the Sudetenland, and essentially take over parts of Czechoslovakia by military force, and these countries wouldn't do anything about it. However, what they said was, if you do this, no more. Okay, this is the last territory that you get to take over. You've got to stop here. Okay, so the leaders of these countries come out of this meeting and they say, I've met with Hitler and he agrees to peace in our time if we give him the Sudetenland. Now we have peace. So Neville Chamberlain says, hey, we have peace now. He says that he's going to stop here. He says he won't get us involved in the war if we give him what he wants. Let's give him what he wants. So this is what we call appeasement. They're appeasing the what we now know is an extreme dictator. They're appeasing this dictator and giving him what he wants because they're afraid of getting in a war. Same as your kid in the grocery store. They're giving the kid what they want. In order to avoid what they consider a bigger problem. But what happens as a result of this? The dictator is going to be able to basically do whatever he wants. Who says that he has to stop there? Because now he knows that you're afraid to do anything about it when he takes over another country, right? All right, so Germany annexes the Sudetenland, and here's what another leader in Great Britain said at the same time. Neville Chamberlain's the prime minister, but another leader in Great Britain who's not quite as not prime minister yet. Winston Churchill says appeasement is like feeding a dragon, hoping he will eat you last, and that's what brings us to Dr. Seuss, because Dr. Seuss wrote did a political cartoon that essentially shows the same thing. The appeaser in the middle with these lollipops, and when I put it in Google Slides, it didn't do the zoom out thing. But if you zoom out on this a little bit, well, look the the dragons have these Nazi symbols and everything. If you zoom out, the guy in the middle, the appeaser, is saying, "Okay, one more lollipop, and then everyone goes away." Right? Um, so are the dragons going to not eat the guy with the lollipops? No, when he's done with the lollipops, they're just going to eat him, right? Um, so that's what Winston Churchill was saying. Appeasement is like feeding a dragon, hoping he will eat you last. Um, so that's what we're talking about here. They're feeding Hitler these lollipops and hoping that it doesn't come back to bite them. Now, what happens after that? In 1939, of course, Hitler was not done conquering new territory. He attacks Poland, invades Poland next, and at that point, since they've already met with him and said, "Hey, you've got to you've got to stop this. You've got to stop taking over new territory, or you're going to start a war." Now Hitler's like, "Hey, you're not going to stop me. You're afraid of getting in a war anyway." So he invades Poland to try to get their territory back there, and after that, and after all these ways in which he's broken the Treaty of Versailles, the militarizing the Rhineland, having 600,000 instead of 100,000 troops. I'm sure there were other violations of the Treaty of Versailles there as well, but there's invading invading these territories that to try to make Germany larger again. After all these ways that he's broken the treaty, finally, in 1939, after he invades Poland, Britain and France declare war with Germany, and then Neville Chamberlain says we're finally going to go to war. But after that, Neville Chamberlain, as he's people are very upset with the way he handled Hitler in the first place. So he has to step down, and actually Winston Churchill takes his place. Chamberlain resigns, and then Churchill becomes the new British Prime Minister. England and Germany are at war at this point. America, at the same time, is isolationist, and they want to avoid another deadly war. However, they want to help their allies, so they do this thing called the Lend-Lease Act, where we loan military and not military, but like we loan weapons and military infrastructure to France and Britain, mostly, and then or lease it to them for a short period of time, and then they'll give it back. So we're helping them out. We also give them money and help them in the war effort. So we're going to help our allies in this war effort. But the United States is isolationist. We want to keep to ourselves. We don't want to get into another European war like we did World War I. So that's what Franklin Roosevelt says at first. So here's some more Dr. Seuss cartoons. So during while America is trying to stay out of this, Dr. Seuss has this cartoon as well, where you've got America in the middle of all this of this war, saying, "Oh, it's not going to affect us. We're fine, right? We're all the way across the Atlantic. We're not going to be affected by this." But what ends up happening? You probably know by now what ends up happening. Pearl Harbor happens, and we lose a lot of American lives there, and we end up being part of the war after all. Okay. Let's see. All right, this is my favorite of the Dr. Seuss cartoon. Favorite Dr. Seuss cartoon ever, right here. So that you've got someone wearing a shirt that says "America First." That sounds familiar, right? But this was actually an isolationist slogan at the time, saying, "Hey, we've got to think of America first and not think of these other European countries, and we've got to put us first and try to stay out of everything else." So she's reading a children's book called Adolf the Wolf, and it says, "And the wolf chewed up the children and spit out their bones, but those were foreign children, and it really didn't matter." So you've got Dr. Seuss saying he's using satire here. He's he's making fun of these America First people and saying, oh, we they're just foreign children. They don't really matter. It would only be if American children were affected that that this would really matter, which is pretty much how that happens. Once American lives begin to be lost in Pearl Harbor, then we get involved in the war. Another Dr. Seuss cartoon. This is Hitler walking up the backs of spineless leaders of democracy. So there's those leaders of European countries who didn't really do anything about him. And I think up here is boss of the universe, saying basically he's becoming more powerful, stepping on the backs of everyone who's too afraid to stop him. All right. What a lucky thing we've got separate beds. So you've got America over here being just fine, and then Europe has all these problems. All right. Oh, the ostrich head. So ostriches are famous for putting their heads in the sand, um, and that's their metaphor for what the United States is doing during this time is putting our heads in the sand, and it relieves Hitler headache. Forget the terrible news you've read. Your mind's at ease in an ostrich head. Saying just stick your head in the sand and don't pay attention to all this terrible news coming from Europe. All right, that is all. Oh, hey, perfect timing. That is all I've got for you for today. So make sure you have those notes on your pieces chart, and I will see y'all. Yeah, I'll see y'all in a little bit. Y'all have a good day.